Of some of the competitors in the 125-mile canoe race from Devizes to Westminster, the toughest canoe race in the world.
Good Friday morning in Devizes, and like every Good Friday since 1948, the starting point for one of the most grueling of all races, the Devizes to Westminster canoe race. To compete in the 125-mile race from Devizes to Westminster, you have to be fit and prepared to train at all times and in all weathers. The race was started as a challenge by some Devizes scouts. Now it attracts canoeing enthusiasts from clubs throughout the country. All of them face a tough job getting their canoe 54 miles through the still waters of the Kennet and Avon Canal. Many places are choked with weeds and some stretches completely dry. This means you've got to be fit for canoeing and be strong enough to carry your canoe across the dry stretches and around 56 locks. And on joining the Thames, another 20 locks have to be negotiated, mostly at night. The favourites for this year's race are Brian Greenham and Tim Cornish from Reading. They're members of the Leighton Park and Richmond Canoe Club. Tim's a civil engineer and spends most of his time helping to construct motorways and bypasses, catering for the ever-increasing traffic of the 20th century. In sharp contrast, his love of canoeing takes him on sedate canals where commercial traffic has all but disappeared. Brian works as an electronic test engineer at Bracknell in Berkshire. He's deaf, a disability that can make life lonely, but marathon canoeing has enabled him to get as much out of his life as he would desire. He and Tim have no need to talk during a race. Both concentrate only on getting their canoe through the water rapidly and with minimum wasted effort. They won the race last year in record time and hope to be even faster this year.
Ron, when you take the boat away from a portage, you've got to try and get your stroke in time so the boat moves away nice and smoothly. Coming up there, you're out of time, especially on the right-hand side. So if you can watch Tim and follow and make sure the blades are going in the water at the same time. Okay.
Race official Stuart Syrad won the race in 1954 when he was a young Marine officer.
Pushing out high with your right.
And now he hands on his experience of canoeing to a couple of Marine entrants for this year's race.
Paddle in close to the boat and a good recovery around about your buttocks so that you've got the thing out without lifting up, dragging water and thus slowing the boat down. We're just trying to get you human beings to be as mechanically sound as a machine. It's not always that easy, but nevertheless it's got to be done. And of course the girl we've seen paddling today, she tends to have a lovely body turn, as we might expect.
The girl Stuart Syrad had seen was Sue Templeton, competing this year with her partner Marcus Church. Marcus works as a technician with an electronics firm in Southampton, and he's a member of the Worthies Canoe Club. He competed in the race twice before, but with a different partner. At Southampton Civic Centre, Sue works in the administrator's office. She's a member of the Itchen Valley Canoe Club and is one of the few girls to have entered for the race. When she last competed, she finished 12 hours behind the winners.
I took part in the Devizes Westminster race in 1977. I was hoping for a better time then, but we had a lot of problems and the time wasn't as good as I'd hoped for. So this time I'm hoping for at least under 24, but given with the level of the Thames at the moment, hopefully that might come down to 22. But, you know, you can never tell with this race. Things go wrong, you know, it all depends.
What's Marcus like as your partner?
He's okay, but he talks too much. No, we seem to get on. The first time we went out training, it was extremely rough. We had tremendous headwinds and nearly 2 foot waves on the Thames, and we coped quite well then stability-wise, and our paddling rate together seems quite good. We slotted in quite well, which is unusual, I think, because sometimes people have difficulty in fitting in with each other, but we seem to have got on okay.
Of course, this is the first time I've done it with a girl as a partner, so it's another interesting challenge in that respect. And the other challenge aspect of it is that about 6 weeks after the race last year, I was involved in a car accident, and I was fairly badly crunched up with a broken neck and 1 or 2 things. And a race of this endurance, which is recognised as the world's toughest canoe race, is something to really go for and push yourself to try and do. And, well, here we are, all set to go.
Soon after dawn on Good Friday, the competitors start to arrive at the assembly point in Devizes. There are 2 classes in the race. Juniors, for crews between the ages of 16 and 18, they start after 9 in the morning and have to complete the race in 4 stages. They're not allowed to race at night.
All you want is our canoe team.
And there's a very light jumper in the bottom.
Yeah, in the back bag. Bit of abuse. Works wonders with Marcus.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
The senior class may start between 7 in the morning and 6 in the evening. Each crew times their departure so as to arrive at Teddington at high tide, when they can take advantage of the ebb on the final 17 miles of tidal water from Teddington to Westminster. Brian and Tim intend to leave early to catch the tide that evening. They reckon they can just make it, but they've got to be at Teddington by 9 o'clock. Miss that and all their efforts will have been in vain. Nobody has tried this before and succeeded.
Pairs of socks. Pairs of chocolate. Pints of drink. Yeah. 2 life jackets. Here, and they'll be here in a minute. Brian's just...
But before they leave, they must be checked through the start control. Regulations are strict, and a minimum amount of equipment is required to ensure health and safety. No one is allowed to race until the checkers are satisfied, and tagging confirms that they've complied with the rules. At 7 o'clock, Tim and Brian are the first to leave Devizes.
Is it here we stop, Marcus? You have to get a piece of sticker.
Oh, can you
Can we get the red sticker here?
Then we got a long drag into London with...
Sue and Marcus know that they've no hope of reaching Teddington to catch the evening tide and prepare to leave later. They reckon to get there in the early hours of Saturday morning.
My emergency chocolate's under the seat.
Your sleeping bag, Marcus.
The sleeping bag's in here. That's the sleeping bag. Okay.
Yeah.
2 complete tracksuits. One's in there. 2 pairs of socks.
Yeah, there's those white things there.
Right. Those are the white smelly things there. Pound of chocolate.
Yeah.
A torch.
Yeah, there's one on the front.
Right. Thank you.
We're ready.
Time?
We will. We're going now.
Got 3 minutes, Sue.
Where's the start then?
There. Just there.
The seat's moving, Danny.
The Kennet and Avon Canal from Devizes passes through Hungerford, Newbury and on to Reading, where it joins the Thames. Once on the river, the current helps the competitors to Teddington, and from there on to Westminster, a good ebb tide can increase their speed by 2 miles an hour. At Hungerford, Tim and Brian's support crew are ready to provide food and drink.
You're getting quite good, aren't you, Malcolm?
Any minute now, yeah.
Each crew have friends to help wherever access to the waterway is possible. Already they are well up to schedule and increasing the distance between themselves and the rest of the competitors.
Yeah, 1 hour.
The first lock, 14 miles from Devizes, is at Wootton Rivers, and it's beginning to witness the annual pilgrimage of the enthusiasts.
What's your number? 197.
Many of the 90 senior crews have reached here, and after sitting in a wet canoe for 3 hours, the strain is already showing.
To do it better. Hey, Marcus.
Go on, Sue, doing grand.
You left us as we were.
Hello.
Canoeists are a mixed bunch. Many train and compete seriously, while others find it another way of spending a day out, perhaps as a change from a picnic with the family.
Presenting Marcus, the human dustbin. Alright, keep it up. Let's get going then.
At Newbury, Tim and Brian are still pushing their way to the Thames. It looks effortless, but the high speeds they achieve result from a training schedule of 120 miles canoeing each week.
Faster than last year.
It's 14 minutes faster.
14 minutes faster, that's good.
Have you got that time?
Yes. 4:44. How much is that down on the schedule?
That's 7 minutes down.
7 minutes down. How long is it going to take them to get to Aldermaston?
About 12 minutes.
12, right.
18.
We should have plenty of time to get there.
At Sevenoake, the competitors pass through the Bruce Tunnel. And then on to the highest point of the canal route at Crofton. Derelict locks and a dried-up canal make this 2-mile stretch a tough slog. Carrying the canoe containing survival bags, sleeping bags, clothing and emergency rations can be a very wearing experience.
How are you feeling?
I'm fine at the moment, thanks.
I've got a headache.
Have you?
Yeah.
Is this the worst bit of the course now?
once this is over, it's not too bad.
Yeah, I can just see Sue up at the other lock there.
They're doing well then?
They're doing very well, you know, they're about 10 minutes above schedule.
Sue and Marcus have now been 4.5 hours on the canal and still paddling well. Tim and Brian reach Reading, leave the canal and join the Thames, still keeping well up to schedule.
Okay, Sue, I've got it. Right, you got that end?
Newbury, mid-afternoon, and Sue and Marcus are losing time to the leaders, but still keeping to their own schedule.
Come on then. Let's go then.
Don't forget to kick left. Kick hard left. Kick.
Very good.
I know!
You lot are getting lazy in your old age, going by car.
Well, this is it. They can't... the ones along the Crofton section carrying their stuff, and it was too much for them. But it's a bit unfortunate when they run out of road, isn't it? See you later. You will do.
With the Thames current to help them, Tim and Brian have increased their speed, still paddling at a constant rate and displaying the form that has given them a place in the Olympic training squad. Back at Reading, Sue is showing signs of tiredness. She's been canoeing now for 11 hours.
You've got to lift some, Marcus. Don't leave it all to the lady. Put the heavy end.
Some of the other competitors change into warm, dry clothes to face a night on the Thames.
Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
At the same time as Sue and Marcus reach the Thames, Tim and Brian are 45 miles ahead, well on the way to reaching Teddington for high tide.
He's a race official up here, look.
Yes.
If he says anything, he won't reach Westminster.
My poor dear. Don't think you don't have my heartfelt sympathy.
By the time Sue and Marcus reach Marshlock, Sue is very tired, but there is no way anyone can help. Outside assistance is forbidden under the rules of the race.
All right.
I'm in my house at the moment. Do you like tomato soup? Oh, no. Yeah. Do you like more tomato? Yeah. So, do you like tomato soup? No. No.
Cheers.
Okay.
Typical.
It's at Marshlock that they decide to change into a warmer kit for the night.
Well, one of them you can turn into a wet bag.
And even canoeists sometimes have to spend a penny.
Where is it?
How are you feeling, Marcus?
Oh, not too bad at all, thanks, John. Not too bad at all.
After all your injuries and things, no aches and pains?
My wrist is a slight problem, and especially on portaging on the left-hand side. And also breathing's a little bit sort of messed about a bit, but, well, that's, you know, it's only pain.
13.5 hours after leaving Devizes, Tim and Brian reach Teddington, still showing little sign of relaxing their relentless pace. Their organisation is good, and here, as throughout the race, their friends give them the support to keep them going. With the tide to help them, they now have 17 miles to go to Westminster. Sue and Marcus now have to navigate in the dark. The river's in flood and there are dangerous weirs every 3 miles. What with that and the intense cold, it looks like being a difficult night.
See you in the morning.
See you in the morning. Yes, will do.
Late evening at Westminster, and the race is over for Tim and Brian. Their early departure from Devizes has paid off, and they had the last of the ebb tide from Teddington. Now, after 125 miles of non-stop effort, they are cold, wet and exhausted. They've achieved their aim of sticking to a tough schedule and know their time is good. But until all the results are in, they don't know if it's going to be good enough.
Thank you very much. It's really tremendous.
I'm Brian.
Thank you.
I just missed them in Newbury. Yeah.
Well done, boy. Brilliant.
Where's it, Cookham? Right up at the weir.
Don't worry, you can hear where the weir is. You can hear the people who don't make it, and the agonised scream as they come over.
While the rest of the field wearily keep going, Tim and Brian can start to relax, knowing it's all over for them. All that remains are aching limbs and blistered hands. That and the luxury of a warm shower.
Show me the way to go on.
In the early hours of the morning, Teddington is getting busy. There's just enough water to paddle through a side channel and avoid carrying the canoe over the lock. But there seems to be too little water for some. Sue and Marcus managed to find a way through. Now it's just 17 miles of paddling with the ebb tide to help them on their way. At dawn, the early finishers have made it to Westminster, but not all of them are able to enjoy the pleasure of knowing that their journey is over. At least memories of the worst parts of the trip will be quickly erased and stories of how they made it to Westminster will last for at least another year, when most of them will try again. At Teddington, Sue and Marcus were set to finish well under their target of 24 hours. But on this last stretch, they've been losing many valuable minutes.
They were doing a very good time, you know, down to Teddington, and they've taken, what, nearly 3 hours on this section, which should have took 2 hours. So we don't know where they are or what they're doing.
On what should have been the easiest part of the course, Sue and Marcus have lost a lot of time, and it could only have been because they lost their energy to paddle effectively. From being well inside their schedule, it seems they've only just beaten their 24-hour deadline.
Hold on, it says. Oh, good.
Where am I going? Step over, because you're going to... Just step out of that. Only I don't want you to step over that side because you can go right.
Anyway, you got under 24. Alright. Anyway, you made it. Good time. What a hell of a way to bring home the bacon.
Well done.
Well done, Marcus. Cheers, John.
Shake hands for the picture.
Of course I will. Well done.
I'm part of that.
But right, well,
Hang on.
you take
Okay, right. Oh.
20 crews failed to finish, many of them suffering from exhaustion and exposure. In fact, most of the finishers had thoughts of packing up at some time.
First started thinking of quitting after the first 10 miles because it's so boring and on dead flat water, you know, it's such a hard slog and a grind. And then, you know, sort of sometimes down during the course when you get a bit tired or irritable, like at Wootton Rivers, you know, where sort of something goes wrong, you know, it all sort of builds up and you think, you know, is it worth going on? And especially since this was my second time, because I thought, well, I've already proved that I can do the race and, you know, I'm going out for a good time, and if I don't get the time, well, then it's hardly worth doing it.
Yeah.
And, you know, you sort of keep thinking, well, why do you need to do it again just to get a good time? You know, surely finishing is just enough.
Eton Bridge, we were feeling a bit tired, and it's rather an accumulative effect. It just sort of built up and up, and then of course there's various other little things. I managed to put some weight on my left hand, which didn't make things any easier, and Sue was feeling rather sick at times.
Marcus is where he's got his plate in his left wrist, the same as my left wrist is the worst. That slowed him up an awful lot as well, and in fact we're just both physically shattered.
Can you feel anything? With a little bit of cream, you'll be all right tomorrow. Yeah.
Now, blisters aren't too bad.
When the results were announced, Sue and Marcus finished in 39th place and beat their 24-hour target by 8.5 minutes. Tim and Brian finished first in a record time of 15 hours, 34 seconds, beating their previous record by 1 hour. But for all who made it, finishing at Westminster was achievement enough.
I'll have total pose, tomahawks, spikes of these, which will go to poop. I'm an Indian too.